All right, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Julie speaking. I'm host for our Consuli Conversations Club. Glad you could all be here. Thanks for working around our little glitch, but happy to have you. A couple of things I just want to point out. If everyone wants to take a moment and ping others into the room, you can use the plus sign at the bottom. The search bar is great. If you have a lot of followers, to narrow it down, you can use keywords like clinical or trials, and people with those words in their bio will pop up. So kind of helps narrow the search for individuals that you think may be interested in checking out our room right now. Be sure to follow others in the room as well. We're inspired. Follow our moderators, follow Michael, follow myself. You can see in my bio our schedule. There's also my email and our socials. If anybody wants to reach out directly with comments, feedback, if you'd like to, recommend somebody else for our panel in the future, that'd be great. I'd be happy to hear from you. For those that don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with a mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy, with experts suggesting our individual data being worth about $20,000 per year. We do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent. We assemble patients' health records, labs, prescriptions, wearables, things of that nature. And importantly, members receive smart matched individualized offers from us for opportunities, including to participate in clinical trials or data trials. There's no cost for anyone to join our movement. I suggest you check us out at consuli.net. It's consuli.net. Again, that information is in my bio, so check it out. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to our room co-facilitators, Heather Williams and Michael Young. They'll be introducing themselves and our other guests. So thank you. This is Julie, and I'm
great. Thanks, Julie. Appreciate it. This is Michael Young, and hello, Clinical Trial Clubhousers. Welcome to this is actually our sixth gathering, and we are now a full-on club. This club is designed for clinical trialists, pharma industry execs, and of course, patient activists who are interested in solving burning questions in clinical trials. You can, as Julie has noted, you can certainly check us all out here by looking at our panel profiles, and we welcome newcomers. I see a few of the little party hats out there, so that's a good sign. And for those of you who are a little more familiar with Clubhouse, we hope you'll be active participants over the next hour here. We do try to keep this to an hour, and we are going to be addressing each week one burning question, which comes from a discussion during the last 5 minutes of our program. Plus, we do get other suggestions. We're always canvassing things nationwide, so it's always interesting to see what comes up. What we're doing today is following up on a string of conversation that's been happening around patient remuneration and patient payments for enrollment in clinical trials, and we're going to be talking about that in just a second. So Heather's going to take us into the actual construct. So Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Julie. Great to see everybody here, familiar faces and new. Thanks for joining us. I'm Heather. I head up operations and project management for a company called TrialStat. We're an e-clinical suite for data collection, management, and reporting for clinical research. And I'm also involved in a new patient wayfinding project that I'm working on to help support patients and their caregivers by making it easier to navigate through their journey and their health experience. So for today, we're going to be opening up the discussion on this week's One Burning Question very soon. But before we jump in and do that, I want to welcome everybody here, both in the audience and on the stage, and to say hello to some of the folks that we have with us here as our speakers and our experts and our interested parties in this topic. So what I'll do is turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves. Maybe we can start with you, Amy.
Sure thing. So, hey, everybody, I'm Amy Sitnick. I head marketing at Greenfire, and I love the title of this, very on brand for Greenfire to address one burning question. And look forward to today's conversation. I'll pass it on to my colleague, Dave.
Thanks, Amy. Dave Hine. I'm the Director of Client Experience and Education at Greenfire, and like Amy, just happy to come and have a conversation about patient remuneration, as you put it, Michael. So, Christine, why don't you go next?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So I am Christine von Rayfeld, and I am a patient advocate turned, I don't know, maybe CEO, and I am trying to build a nonprofit on collaborations. Just a quick tip for anyone that we might bring up as a speaker. There's 3 little dots in the corner on the right-hand side. There is a microphone quality there. So if you step onto stage, I would recommend going to the mic quality and setting that at normal or high. And that's my tip. And I'm Christine. So I'll pass it over to Luke.
Hi, thanks everyone. It's great to be here. My name's Luke Chalinas. I am an IRB chair at Advara. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I've spent many hours thinking about it and reviewing studies that offer payment. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And I think maybe Dr. Mary is left.
Hi, this is Marian Risk, and I've been in the industry doing transformation, leveraging technology and partnerships. So certainly whenever there's an emerging topic, whether there's clinical significance from the site for the patients, I find it my duty to create an ecosystem of blending both digital and technology innovation through the power of partnership. So delighted to be part of this and adding value as I may, whether it's collaboration ideas or a set of partners. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. And it's so great to have such a diverse group of folks here who are involved in this area of expertise. So I think maybe the right thing to do now is jump into our one burning question. What are we talking about today? Today's Consuli one burning question is, are payments to patients for enrollment and participation in clinical trials the solution, or do they create ethics and bias issues? And what works, if not, and what works about doing it this way? So we've got a great panelist group here today. And what we'll do is we'll start to open it up to everybody here. And then for those in the audience who want to participate, don't forget to raise your hand. We'll do a round with our group that's on the stage right now. And for those that are unfamiliar or new to the platform, sometimes you might see us flashing our mics. That's generally an indication that we're agreeing with, or we really like the idea. It's sort of a way of showing clapping. So for you in the audience who might not be familiar with that, that's a great way to communicate. So what I'll do is turn it over to you, Amy, and what do you think about payments to patients? I'm Heather, I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Heather. So Dave and I are going to piggyback this sort of intro to today's discussion together. So as Dave and I introduced, we represent Greenfire. We work with a clinical trial payments company. This is how we got our start, focused exclusively on making it easier for clinical research sites to pay patients in clinical trials. And really, it's all about reducing the participant burden. So, you can look at any CISCRP study, and everything that that they discuss and they evaluate when they poll patients is that when they're deciding to whether or not to participate in a clinical study, or if you're asking them what they didn't like about their experience, there are things that we can generally control. So the burden on patients, so the time spent at the clinic, the getting back and forth, transportation, out-of-pocket costs. And so we've really sort of built our entire business on making it easy for research sites and sponsors and CROs to facilitate that process of reimbursing the patient, to make it really ultimately easier to recognize them for their investment of time, as well as their bodies for the betterment of research. So since we work with all kinds of sponsors around the globe, we have been able to sort of see what works, what doesn't work, and really what the trends are. And that's where I really want to turn the conversation over to Dave to talk a little bit from his vantage point, what he's hearing with regards to payments.
Thanks, Amy. One of the things I wanted to call out here in the introduction was, we hear about patient payments a lot, But the reality is there, at least the way that we see them at Greenfire and the way we set them up in our systems, is we kind of bucket those payments into two different categories: a stipend or a flat rate payment, or a direct reimbursement for an incurred expense. And I know earlier when we were looking over some of the topics that we were going to discuss today, it was, is it controversial or not to do these things? Is it part of the problem or part of the solution? And I think that a lot of times when people hear payment, they think stipend. But sometimes that term can also include reimbursement. So I just think it's interesting and important to make sure that as we're having this conversation, we try to be more specific with what exactly we're describing. So reimbursements obviously can be, something that a participant paid for to participate in the trial. So drive mileage, for example, or fuel for their car, or parking or tolls, things that are directly going to be reimbursed. And then there are stipend payments, which can be, sometimes they are designed to be an all-inclusive. It's just a simpler way of reimbursing a patient for those expenses by giving them a flat, $50 per visit or $75 per visit. And that is meant to cover their parking, their tolls, and their gas. But sometimes those stipends are meant to cover other things as well, like their time or just the fact that they volunteered. So there's all sorts of ways that these things get paid to patients. And I think the specificity there is really interesting. In terms of what we're hearing from our sponsors and CROs and really from our sites that we work with as well, is patient convenience is like this big, huge momentum push in the marketplace, where we're finding that a lot of our sponsor and CRO partners are trying to go above and beyond, more than just parking, more than just tolls. They're asking questions like, can we reimburse for childcare, or can we reimburse for gym memberships, right? There's all sorts of things that are kind of in this like gray bucket, or maybe a new bucket of expense types that people are looking to reimburse for. So I'll stop there. Obviously, we can talk a lot more, but want to give everybody else a chance to speak as well.
Dave, this is Michael, and I really appreciate the breadth of your inclusion on this topic, as we also want to get to things such as incentives to actually enroll. So not even from an expense standpoint, but really not compensation, but incentives that might be involved, and what the legality, the impact on clinical trial data collection, and really looking at the ethics of this. So to speak to a little bit of that, I'd love to, because I know Luke has been jonesing to comment. So let's, Luke, what are your views on where some of this is going? Because you're just seeing this incredibly steep hill here with trying to get active enrollment.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. There's so much I want to say, and I really appreciate the comments from Amy and Dave. So I'm just going to put my cards on the table at the start. As I said, I'm an IRB chair, but I'm a pro-payment IRB chair. We do exist, and I actually worry too much about participants not being reimbursed or compensated, or about being undercompensated or under-reimbursed, than I do about excessive payment. And I think that's out of step with the sort of the history and tradition here. There's sort of this big, long history of worrying a whole lot about paying research participants. And when I sort of reflect on that, I'm always puzzled about why we worry so much about paying research participants when we don't really worry much at all about paying people for similar kinds of activities in other spaces. So if you just think about the work that a firefighter does, or even, let's say, a member of the military, participants, both of these kinds of activities involve time-consuming, burdensome tasks, the assumption of risks, and we don't seem to think twice about compensating people on the basis of those things in other professions. So I'm always a bit puzzled why. And I think the reason really is that regulators have said you should worry about this, and what they seem to be worried about is that the possibility that paying people will somehow compromise their informed consent. It will sort of get them to do something that maybe they shouldn't do. It will distort their evaluation of the risks or something like this. And I'll just end by saying that's sort of an empirical question. And when you look at the handful of studies that have tried to evaluate how offering payment impacts people's decision-making for research specifically, you find that actually the more payment you offer people, the more hesitant and sort of careful they tend to be, the more time they spend actually reviewing consent materials, for example, which kind of makes sense. If someone comes up to you and offers you money, sort of do something when you're not expecting it, you probably should think twice and think hard about why they're offering you money to do this. So to me, I don't really see what the grounds for worrying too much about it, what they are, or that they're well substantiated. And I think there are a number of really good reasons to actually that favor increasing payment or incentivizing participation. One, as you said, Michael, is just we have such a hard time getting these studies to completion in the research community. The other is I really resonated with what Amy said about removing those burdens. And oftentimes they are pretty mundane burdens that payment can help with, childcare, parking, and the like. Finally, I think if we want to diversify study samples and study populations, especially for disadvantaged populations who may be economically vulnerable, those burdens are real. And I think that's something that offering incentives and compensation reimbursement can really help with. Yeah. Sorry, I'm Luke.
Luke, that was outstanding. You covered quite a bit of ground there. And I before we end today, I definitely do not want to miss the commentary about how patient incentives or payments could help us resolve some of the issues around diversity and lack of representation in clinical trials. So, besides certainly we need to take a look at what the patient world is thinking about this. So, Christine, I'll ask you to dive in here and give us some of your views as to what you see in that patient community.
Sure. So I have been dying to unmic myself. And Amy and Dave and we have had in-depth discussions about this, and I am very happy to be able to share my perspective. First, what I think we need to do before we start anything is reframe clinical trials. Right now, patients look at clinical trials as a last-ditch option, and that's not what it should be. We should offer clinical trials to people when they enroll in a healthcare system and give them an option when they are of sound mind and say, okay, in case you are diagnosed with something, here are your options. You can go with the regular standard treatments, or we do have clinical trials in certain areas. Are you willing to participate? That way, it's not this moment of how do I save my life and are you screwing me over? Sorry, or whatever. The fear of placebos, the fear of being stuck in a trial, and not even realizing they're going to get better care in a trial than they would with their normal doctor. So, second part of that is that patients look at this as they're a guinea pig, right? They don't know what's going to happen. Somebody specifically made that comment to me. I'm involved in a Johns Hopkins study on the antibodies for the vaccine. And I had posted posts saying after my first vaccine, I had not developed any antibodies. So I wanted to make sure people out there took precautions and were just vigilant about wearing your mask if you were an immunosuppressed patient or a transplant patient, and just protect yourself. And I had a patient actually comment saying, you're a guinea pig, you shouldn't be doing this, they're using you. And I thought about deleting it and then stopped and actually commented back and said, I actually chose to participate in this. I volunteered because I want to be able to make sure it's safe for people like you. Mm-hmm. And then that's when she said, thank you. But before that, her whole viewpoint of clinical trials was something negative. So that's my first thing. And then my second thing, I'm going to go way off on some nonsense here, but I think we just need to restructure healthcare. We have so many companies out there in the precision medicine space. You have the NIH, you've got Verily, with that are out there to sequence our population. And so I think as patients, we need to fight for our digital rights. We should turn our patient advocacy groups into data brokers and let them negotiate what they have with these companies and build better solutions, but give these patients equity in what they're helping to build. Right now, I'm giving you my blood, sweat, and tears, and maybe getting a thank you or a $25 Amazon gift card. And it's ridiculous because none of these studies could go on without me. And if you don't know me, I live on Social Security disability. So I am in the middle of Silicon Valley trying to survive on $1,600 a month, when everybody I speak with and all of the companies that I work for and that I back up are making millions. So I just want to know how that's fair. So I'm Christine, and that's my perspective.
Outstanding, Christine. And we certainly, I hope you don't mind me sharing. I mean, your energy and the efforts that you are making to spread the word are incredible. Folks here don't know that you were just recently hospitalized. And I think the fact that you're here today and pushing this agenda and being a voice for patients in this is really impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was funny. I was just telling someone the other day on Rare Disease Day, I ended up in the ER and actually did a global presentation with somebody in India from the ER. So it's recorded, and you see my doctors like in there and me muting and talking to them. And I thought afterwards, how stupid am I? So thank you for actually recognizing that sometimes my stupidity pays off and that people actually appreciate it. So thanks.
Absolutely. I'm going to just reach out to Marianne. Marianne, I know you may be in transit somewhere, but I think you were being modest about your experience in the overall clinical trials arena when you were talking about some of the stuff that you're currently doing. But do you have some other thoughts that you'd like to add? And then we want to open this up to the audience. Marianne, can you hear us? Okay, she may be on mute there. So, I think that these are all really, you're bringing up enough for several different clubhouse discussions. I would like to obviously make a note here that if anybody who's in the audience that wants to come up and speak, please feel free to do so by raising your hand. And otherwise, I'd like to go back to Luke. And Luke, if you would like to expound a little bit more on how you see incentives potentially expanding the opportunities with some of these neglected or hard to reach patient populations.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much really I have to say beyond sort of what Amy and others have alluded to here, which is that if you actually, talk to participant populations and disadvantaged groups about why they don't participate in research, it tends to be pretty mundane stuff. It doesn't tend to be like, I don't want to get a placebo, although that may sometimes be the case, but it tends to be like, I work and I have kids and I can't really afford to take a day off from work, or I can't afford to get childcare, or I don't want to pay for parking and gas. And so to me, payment isn't, I don't think, a magic bullet here, but it's sort of a necessary first step in the right direction, as Amy said, of removing some of those very basic obstacles to participation in people's lives, and particularly people who are economically vulnerable.
Hey, Luke, can I step in for 1 second? This is Christine. I just wanted to say, in addition to all those barriers, you also have a population of people who don't even know what clinical trials are. I've been on several panels in groups where patients have come out and said, my doctors never told me that I could participate in these things. So I think the option of how we're even offering it to patients is something that we need to look into too. And I'm done.
Yeah, no, Christine, I completely agree. Oh, did we lose Luke? Oh, Luke, there you are.
I did. I just got booted out of the room. I'm sorry. My connection went down for a second. So I didn't hear the question or comment. I'm sorry.
Luke, I have a question for you. Where we sit, we certainly see lots of patient reimbursement payment all around the world. But one thing that I think is still a question is whether or not sponsors and CROs and sites feel it's appropriate to pay or reimburse for that initial visit when someone goes in to be evaluated for a clinical trial. Do you have experience with, counseling clients or, when you're reviewing documents about how often, people are reimbursing for that initial sort of site patient evaluation?
Sure. So for like a screening visit, you mean?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it varies. We do see some studies where they are reimbursing or compensating for screening visits, but I agree with you that most of them aren't. And to me, it's sort of the same logic. If someone takes the time to come down to your site or even to meet with you via Zoom or complete, I don't know where we want to draw the line here, maybe not complete an online screener, but certainly if they're coming to your site, and taking time out of their day, it's the same rationale. And so I can't myself think of a good reason to say we shouldn't be at least reimbursing for their out-of-pocket expenses for that.
I think that's really interesting. Last week, we had a conversation with a gentleman who has COPD, and he's very involved with the COPD network. And he was talking about, like, especially in those screening visits, he's gone cold turkey, in terms of not being on any medicine to be evaluated for his, particular symptoms that he may have. And so he needs that reimbursement at that time, sometimes even more than he would during a study. So I thought that was interesting.
Right. Sometimes the screening visits are pretty burdensome themselves. I will say one of the things that we're wrestling with, and I think it really varies across IRBs and ethics boards, but we're starting to see more kind of flat rate reimbursement proposals. So it used to be, maybe probably to some extent still is, that the participant would kind of pay out of pocket and then come with the receipts. And now we're seeing preloaded cards up front. And I have heard some people occasionally hear people worry about that. Well, is it really reimbursement if you're offering them a flat fee? So I'd be curious to hear, Amy, from you, whether you're seeing more of that, and Dave too, or kind of how you think about that difference.
Yeah, we see that a lot. We have always had a system that allows for either approach. One of the, so far the conversation's been very US centric, where things like that are allowed. That flat rate, reimbursement, whatever you want to describe that as, that's what I was referring to as a stipend earlier. Most of the time, we're not even allowed to do that outside the United States. There are just so many regulations where those things are prohibited, and it has to be, a receipt being collected for an already incurred expense. But here in the US, absolutely, we do that kind of stuff all the time. And I think what we've been finding more and more is people want to combine the two, because it's not fair to the individual that walked to the site because they live 2 blocks away, and the other person that drove an hour and a half, to give them both $50 for that same visit. And it really is like, what need are you trying to cover, and how are you going about doing that? So I think there's some flexibility in that approach, but the other thing you have to worry about is taxes, because the IRS considers those flat rate payments taxable. And so then you have to worry about, did you go over $600 in a calendar year or not? And if so, 1099 forms, and participants could potentially owe taxes, and it can get quite complicated. So there's, depending on the study and the frequency of visits and the amount of money that you want to give, there's just a hesitation to give stipends at all because they don't want to worry about taxes.
Yeah, that's where I was headed. That's really interesting. And I think that's a bigger systemic issue. That's definitely a difference, because especially if we're talking about disadvantaged populations, again, if they're being compensated or incentivized beyond $600 a year, it's all supposed to be reportable, actually. But if it's beyond $600, most institutions will report that to the IRS. And now you have a situation where someone could possibly stand to lose benefits, or have their, obviously, have their tax status affected. So I think sort of wider efforts and reform are needed on that point. There is a carve out on that point for rare diseases, I believe. I'm not going to remember the statute, but generally I think that's a problematic regulation.
Yeah, I agree on that front. I think the rare disease, I can't remember, but yes, I agree. There's an exception. But yeah, I mean, my wife has recently been going to the doctors a lot, and we are traveling about 40 minutes, and it's mind-boggling how expensive these frequent visits are, between the gas and the parking and the tolls and all that kind of. We've spent hundreds of dollars in the last 2 months just driving back and forth to Philadelphia to see some doctors. And, we're just blessed enough to be able to have a good job where we can pay for that and have the child care that we need. I can't imagine, being in a situation where I'm a single or something like that, and I need to go do that. It would literally be impossible, because I wouldn't have the money to do it,
Can I interrupt for a second and give a
Go ahead,
thought? So,
Please.
so I think a lot of these things that we talk about, we're not actually thinking about empowering our patient community while we're doing this. So I think patients are activated when they feel empowered. And I hear these discussions about pharma saying physicians need to run these clinical trial sites saying they don't have, or doctors' offices saying they don't have time. We're filling in positions with people with degrees, but why not look at using these communities, people who have been through clinical trials, to walk other people through clinical trials? They know exactly how to communicate with their populations. And by having somebody who's been through it and done it, you're also stimulating that positive around the clinical trial. And I don't know. Again, I go back to just reframing clinical trials, because the fact that it is so negative. I mean, I was talking to a guy once and I talked about paying patients to participate in trials, and he said, why would we do that when we're helping you? And I thought, how are you helping me? You're adding cost to my meds and you're not even curing my disease. So just again, reframing that idea of what we're doing here and really making it where it's profitable and equitable for everyone. You'll start to break down that mistrust, if people are actually profiting. So that's my thought. I'm done.
Christine, thank you very much. I want to introduce one other thought here, and that is, to be transparent about this. The premise behind the Consuli.net approach is exactly a patient-centric approach, one in which patients would be compensated on an offer basis for things that they provide. It may not be putting them directly into a clinical trial, but in point of fact, all of the data that is involved from data trials, surveys, things of this nature, these take time, and they require the inputs of these patients, and patients should be compensated for this. I don't think it's unreasonable to understand how much data is actually being scraped through the internet. A lot of it is being used for commercial purposes by those people, those companies that are scraping this. Most evidently, some of the large data management companies and large internet-based companies. But within the clinical trial arena alone, I'm sure all of you have been faced with jumping on to Facebook, and all of a sudden you see the shoes that we were looking at last week are being presented to you. Well, that's because they know what you're looking for, and believe it or not, they know what you're looking for from a healthcare standpoint as well. So I think that we're changing, as you pointed out, Christine, changing a paradigm here about recognizing that people are in fact the product in the case of clinical trials. And so why shouldn't you be compensated for getting engaged, and then compensated for or reimbursed for engaging and following through with the adherence and compliance that's required? Any thoughts on that?
So I have one thought, and just to say, it's not just trials. I mean, patients collect a lot of data, and we have companies in these spaces trying to market to patients. So the data that's collected, it doesn't always even necessarily has to go to pharma, right? This is an opportunity for patients who may never have the opportunity to work to use their negatives in a way that could help other people and also empower them and make them feel proud of what they're doing, instead of shaming them in the fact that they have an illness that they didn't cause themselves. So I think we should look at it not just as compensating them for this for clinical trials, but for any product in the healthcare industry. And again, going back to the digital rights, if I want it to be like a record, and every time you play my song, I should also benefit. So that's it. I'm Christine.
Great, thanks. Heather?
It's been really interesting. One of the things that we run into, because I'm on the execution of the trial side, is that there's a real challenge for a lot of our studies for recruitment. I mean, that's sort of universal, but there's also a challenge for them to do the sorts of things that they would want to do in the study in order to help their patient have a better experience due to either funding or regulatory, mostly regulatory. And so this is really interesting because there's sort of two things. One, how do we agree that this is an okay thing to do, but also how do we start seeing patients, and Christine, you do such a great job of bringing this forward, as a whole person. In this context, they are a whole person and they have this life, and it's not that everybody drops everything to be a part of this trial. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of great suggestions, but around the edges of this, we run into it all the time. And there's a lot of great researchers out there who want to do better by their patients, and they feel hampered by what they can't do to make this experience better for them. So it becomes very functional and very procedural. And I think that's a real failing in our industry and how we're treating our patients. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm Heather, I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Heather. I'll tell you what, we've got a number of other people who have joined the room here. Julie, do you want to reset the room? And while you're doing that, I will just make sure that those folks who have just joined recognize that we're taking the next few minutes to talk about our payments to patients for enrollment, participation in clinical trials, the solution, or do they create ethics and bias issues?
Can I share a quick story with you all, Michael?
Please.
So when I first started in advocacy, one of the first events I went to was sponsored by ICON here in the Bay Area. And they had pulled together, I'd say 20 to like pharma companies and focused around rare drugs, disease development, right? I was a patient in the beginning. I had no idea what I was walking into. And I was listening in. And a lot of the sessions, obviously, not geared towards patient at a drug development conference. And it was interesting. So one of the first sessions that I heard was on collaboration. And these people were talking about how it costs this many trillions of dollars to bring this drug to market, and how do we work together faster to collaborate to bring these drugs to market, to truly benefit the patient community. And it was strange because there was silence in the room. And I don't know, it felt like hours to me. It was probably maybe only 15 seconds. Until someone from ICON actually raised their hand. And she said, I would do it. I see the benefits, but I also work with ICON. And so I left the room for a second because I was just blown away, and went out. I was talking to the CSO and a few people sitting at the table. And I said, what is going on? Like, where are the patients here? Because this is strange. And the vibe is weird, and they said, no one's here. It's just you, and you have the freedom to say whatever you want here. And so at the end of the session, you all know we've been at conferences together, they asked for suggestions or comments at the end of the room. And I stood up and I raised my hand and I said, I'm Christine, I'm not one of you. And I said, I may look like you, I'm dressed like you, and my hair, I'm made up, I have my heels on, and I'm here and I'm participating. I said, but I live on Social Security disability. I live with multiple rare and chronic conditions, and I'm on Social Security disability. And I said, and for me to walk into this room and look at industry as my hope and the people that are going to solve my issues in the future, and then realize you're not there for that. I said, I just want you all to think that you're going home. You're going to plan your trip to Hawaii. You're going to hug your kids. But there are people like me out there who don't have family, who can't work, who cannot get married for the fear of losing their Medicare. Hello. And how do we help them? So it was an interesting perspective. And by all means, it has gotten 100 times better in the industry. And I often remark that it's not the patient advocacy groups or the nonprofits that are helping me. It's actually been my friends that I've made in industry that are empowering me. So again, thank you, Michael and Dave, for including me in conversations, and happy to be here. And that's my little story for you all.
Well, Christine, thanks for your transparency and your bravery here. I appreciate that a great deal. We're coming up here to about 8 minutes to the hour. I want to go around the block here and again, encourage anybody that's in the audience who wants to speak to raise their hand. But Amy, some thoughts again about what you're hearing. Is this in some ways reinforced or has it caused more questions for you?
I mean, I definitely think it's reinforcing participation, the recognition of burden of patients, and more, we touched on it a little bit before about diverse communities of patients. So today, I was just on one of my final planning calls for the DIA diversity meeting, which is taking place at the end of this month on April 27th. And, everyone's talking about not just the challenges, in terms of trying to engage diverse communities further in clinical research. And a lot of it is around education and rebuilding trust where trust may have been broken. But there are things that we can do, like I started the very top of the hour was all around just recognizing the burden on patients, especially those that come from, some underserved communities, providing reimbursement or transportation solutions to just make it really easy, to find ways so that people don't have to say no to participating in clinical research.
The easier it is and the more positive, the more participants you will get.
That's it.
Dave, you want to amplify any of that?
We can fix this fast. So that's my 2 cents. Dave?
Yeah, thanks. There's been some things brought up today that I thought were just super interesting about reforms that need to happen at the government level that obviously none of us on this call are going to be the ones to do. I think those are fascinating ideas worth pursuing, though. One of the things, this conversation about trust, and Luke, one of the things you said about earlier, when we incentivize patients up front, it gives them pause to actually maybe look into what's going to happen. Like there must be risk associated with that. Part of me is wondering if that psychological experiment is actually what's going to help us get over this IRB and ethics concern regarding enrollment. Like, look, by putting a dollar amount on it, we're actually bringing more light to the fact that this is risky. And I don't know, I can see that going either way, but I think it also helps build that trust. You're not walking into an environment where they typically under-enroll and you're saying, hey, come on over and give us your blood and your body and we'll pay for your bus ticket. We're like, no, look, like we want to treat you right from the beginning, but there's risks associated with that. I feel like that transparency is really going to be key to building that trust. And I would just be fascinated to see how that plays out.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna jump down here to Luke. Some final thoughts?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I just want to sound a note of optimism to Ann. Heather, I think you're right that much of the hesitancy here and the obstacles has come from the regulatory side of things, but I think that is changing. There have been a number of kind of initiatives lately, including the Secretary's Advisory Council, HHS, sort of authoring guidance documents and guidelines that take a much more permissive approach to payment. So I'm very hopeful that things are improving on the regulatory side.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I have one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please, Christine, go ahead.
One last closing thing for me. We are next Thursday. I have my own room under Health.Reconsidered, and we are asking the question: is it heart or head that prevents a greater engagement from pharma with patients? So tune in to me on Thursday, 7 a.m. Pacific time. I know it's early for everyone else, but we're working on a global schedule here, so. So if anyone wants to tune in, we'll be having more discussions. And again, happy to provide my perspective and join in anytime you guys want to talk about it again.
Absolutely. We will look forward to inviting you every week as we go forward here. I'm not sure, Marianne, if you're back on, but if you are and you have any other comments, please feel free. Okay. And Heather, I'll come back to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This was really great. And thank you so much for inviting me and including me. And I think that, and just to circle back to what Christine was saying and everybody else here, I think, collectively agrees is that, I mean, this is ultimately a human problem, and we need to figure out how to make this a little more human for the people involved. And it's a lot of work. As somebody who goes through the work of implementing these sorts of studies for my clients, the number of things that these patients have to go through for a lot of these studies it's actually astounding to me that there is a remuneration in more significant volume. So this has been great, and thank you so much, everybody, and we appreciate everybody who joined us today. And those are my thoughts. I'm done speaking.
So when are we doing this again?
I'm in.
Absolutely. We'll take 2 more minutes here, and I'd love to hear if you were going to have an extension or a variation on a theme here for one more burning question next week. What might it be? Who wants to pose a question?
How about how do you build collaborations between people who think they are your competitors?
Okay.
Because there's so many projects that I see in healthcare and the different conferences that I go to, and there are a lot of companies working on the same thing and wasting a lot of money when they could just combine and have a niche market of their own. So I think it'd be an interesting perspective as we explore collaborations.
All right, Christine, I've got that one down. Anybody else? Luke, any thoughts?
I'm brainstorming here.
Well, that's exactly what this is for. So it doesn't have to be a well-formed thought, but does this category seem like it needs some more exploration?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Well,
I think
just
the
want to say,
conversation around digital rights might be interesting as well.
I just had another one too. Maybe, I don't know if this is a bit dated, but the use of social media for improving recruitment and retention, mobile health technologies, and remote data collection would be
I
two
would
that.
love that. And how about one about KO or patients as KOLs, because they have followings that span multiple silos that many doctors or researchers or nonprofits don't have. So,
Christina, I agree with that 100%. I was thinking something along those lines as well. And you referenced it earlier that a lot of people are doing similar things, but I think a lot of people don't know. And it would be really interesting to have bring what you know about what's happening somewhere in this space here, and really sort of make sure everybody gets informed. And I'm saying this very poorly, but just sharing all those things that everyone knows, the things that you share with your friends, the organizations, the associations, they're so all over the place, and it's really hard. And if there was a way to have a conversation about who's doing this the best, who's kind of got interesting ideas that are out there, and making sure everybody's aware, then a lot of people won't spend a lot of cycles on sort of rinse repeat. We can kind of crowdsource all the good stuff around what's already got some momentum. So that's very vague, but hopefully somebody gets where I'm going with that. I'm done speaking.
can I do a bit of self-promotion for a second? Our club, our club Health Reconsidered. Wednesday is a discussion of pharma fuck-ups. I did not swear, that's a PHUCK, where
amazing.
Paul Sims is talking with pharma executives about the mistakes that they've made. So Gary Monk, we heard, almost burned down a lab at GSK. And so they're sharing their experiences of how they messed up and how they would change things. So it's an interesting conversation, not my own, but one under the club that I'm a part of. So if anyone's interested in hearing that perspective of how they failed and how they think we can change it from now on, it is an interesting room to be in.
I might have to tell my friend, because he does quality for a big pharma company. He might be interested to hear about that.
It was just hilarious too, because
well, there's always a travesty to some of this, and obviously one of the most recent events has been this massive screw up at Emergent Technologies around the J&J vaccine. So 15 million doses going down the drain is a very sad story, and truly a pharma F up, if you will. Julie, as relates to digital rights, would you share with the group a little bit about the clubhouse that we have around digital dignity?
Yeah, hi everyone, this is Julie speaking. our data dignity room addresses just that. So we, Consuli as a whole, works to bring people data dignity by giving them control who gets access to and how their data is used, in addition to the making medicine better aspect by connecting people to clinical trials. So our data dignity room, you can also find that information in my bio, as well as if you follow Consuli Conversations, it's in our bio for that as well. And it's a great conversation where we talk about all sorts of.
And Julie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but time-wise, what day and time does that help?
So we are holding the data dignity room monthly. We just had one yesterday. Our next one will be on May 13th. So definitely follow Consuli Conversations. You will get a notification about that. And we'll send out a, we'll put it on social media. So follow our socials, which is also in my bio. Additionally, if you would like a direct email and you're not on our email list, please find my email in my bio and shoot me a message. And I'll be happy to make sure that you get on the list to get notification for that. It's a really great conversation. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, this has been a really wonderful collection of contributors, and I hope you're finding this Clubhouse, Clinical Trials Clubhouse experience to be energizing. We are going to plan to continue here. You can find, as Julie's pointed out, the LinkedIn DM in our profile. And please feel free to contribute thoughts, etc. This is really meant to be a real world scenario around clinical trials for all of the folks that have joined today. And again, my apologies for the mess up on the posting time, but we'll try to be more cognizant of time zone differences the next time. So again, this is Michael Young, and really appreciate all the inputs today. So thank you again. Julie, if you have any other closing announcements, I'd make them now and we'll close out the club.
Great. Thanks, Michael. This is Julie speaking. And I just want to say thanks to everyone for your participation. It was a really interesting conversation and really wonderful to hear from everybody. Definitely interesting. And I look forward to, part 2 and more of this. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows they can always reach me if you have any feedback, suggestions, comments. If there's anyone else you'd like to bring to the panel next time, please reach out to me, let me know. Follow our socials and follow each other, and make sure you poke around everyone's profiles. And I can leave this room open just for a few minutes so everybody gets a moment to see everyone here. Again, thanks for rolling with our time glitch. And for those of you that don't yet know Consuli, I just want to make sure I do spell that for you. It's CONSULI. Find us at consuli.net, learn more about us, reach out to me if you have questions. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Julie. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to hear all of your voices.
See you later, Christine.
See ya. I'll talk to you. You're right. I'll see you tonight. Bye.
Bye.